In the year 2128, everything started with a strange signal that no one could understand at first. The message was weak, like a whisper coming from the edge of the universe. It came to the human communication stations orbiting Neptune, far away from Earth. The scientists working there thought it was just static noise, but when one of the technicians slowed it down and cleaned the distortion, they realized it was not noise at all. It was a pattern, something intelligent. Everyone in the control room froze when they heard a trembling voice through the speakers, speaking in an unknown language, but repeating the same rhythm. After a few hours, one scientist translated a small part of it, using the universal code translators. The words were simple yet terrifying. "We are dying. Please help us. You are the closest." That single sentence spread across Earth within hours. Governments, space agencies, and media networks all started debating what it meant. Could it really be aliens? Many people laughed at the idea, but others felt a deep pull of curiosity and responsibility. Humanity had always looked up at the stars wondering if they were alone. Now, for the first time, someone out there was calling for help, and they had called Earth. The scientists checked the source again. The signal came from a small system only 37 light-years away, near a red star that was dying. No known human missions had ever gone that far, but with new fusion drives and faster-than-light jump engines, a trip like that was no longer impossible. It would take courage, unity, and trust between all nations of Earth. For the first time in history, the entire planet decided to act as one. The United Earth Space Agency announced that they would send a rescue mission. Some people protested, saying humans had their own problems to solve, but the decision was made. The project was called Operation Dawnreach, but soon the media began calling it something else: the Deathworld Fleet. The name came from alien records that had been discovered decades earlier, describing Earth as a death world, a planet too dangerous for most species to even visit. Its gravity, weather, and wildlife were too extreme. Yet humanity had not only survived there, they had thrived. They were seen as tough, unpredictable, and unstoppable. If anyone could survive the unknown and bring help across the stars, it would be the Deathworlders. Across every continent, engineers and builders worked day and night. 12 great ships were chosen and rebuilt for the journey. Each ship had a special purpose: medical support, resource transport, defense, and exploration. The flagship, named Dauntless Horizon, was the largest and most advanced ship ever built by humans. It was led by Commander Sarah Holt, a woman known for surviving impossible missions. Years earlier, she had led a rescue operation on Titan's frozen surface, saving her entire crew after their base exploded. Her name carried weight. She was respected and feared by some, but loved by her team. When she accepted the mission, she simply said, "If they need help, we go." That's what humans do. As the fleet prepared to leave, Earth watched with a mix of pride and fear. People stood in the streets looking up at the skies where the ships glowed like stars in orbit. Children made drawings of the fleet, calling them the Guardians of Life. Old veterans saluted their screens as the ships lifted off one by one. Even those who did not believe in aliens found themselves silently hoping that the crew would return safely. It was a moment of unity that humanity had never known before. There were no flags, no borders, just one world sending its best and bravest into the unknown. Before departure, a final message was broadcast from the fleet to Earth. Commander Holt appeared on the screen, her face calm but determined. "We don't know who called us," she said, "or what waits for us out there. But if there's even one life that can be saved, then this mission is worth everything." Her words echoed around the planet, inspiring millions. Within hours, the fleet began its long journey. The jump engines roared to life, bending space itself. Light burst around the ships like a sunrise in the void, and then they were gone, leaving behind only trails of blue fire and a silent Earth looking upward. During the first days of travel, everything seemed calm. The fleet stayed in contact with Earth through quantum relays, sending back short updates. But deep inside every crew member's heart, there was fear. They were traveling farther than any human had ever gone. The emptiness outside their windows stretched into infinity. No stars, no planets, just endless blackness. Commander Holt spent her nights walking through the observation decks, watching her crew work. She saw their nervous smiles, their whispered prayers, and the way they stared at the stars that seemed to never move. She understood their fear because she felt it too. But fear was something humans knew how to live with. It was the same feeling their ancestors felt when they first crossed oceans or walked into dark forests. Curiosity always won over fear. It always had. Back on Earth, scientists kept monitoring the alien signal. It grew weaker each day, as if the senders were fading away. Sometimes the voice would stutter, then vanish completely for hours. People began to realize that by the time the fleet arrived, it might be too late. But no one dared to say it aloud. Hope was all they had. Across the world, people sent messages of support to the fleet, poems, drawings, songs, and even prayers. Every ship carried millions of digital letters from people of all ages. Many of them ended with the same sentence: "Bring them home." It became the mission's motto, painted across the hull of the dauntless horizon. As the fleet traveled deeper into space, they encountered strange phenomena. Radiation storms danced across the void, and one of the ships lost power for several hours when its shields overloaded. But the crews worked together, repairing and adapting as they went. That was what humans did best. They fixed what broke, no matter how hopeless it seemed. Commander Holt once said to her officers, "The universe tests us because it knows we never stop trying." Her words became a quiet strength for everyone. Days turned into weeks, and then months. They passed through regions of space no one had mapped before. The stars ahead grew brighter, and finally, after what felt like a lifetime, the alien system appeared before them. It was a red sun, dim and flickering, surrounded by broken satellites and clouds of debris. The readings showed massive radiation and dust storms. The planet they were looking for was half burned, its atmosphere unstable. From orbit, it looked like a dying ember, a world gasping for its final breath. The crew stared at the image in silence. Some were in awe, others in shock. Commander Holt whispered, "They were telling the truth." The realization hit everyone at once. Somewhere down there, beneath that broken sky, lived beings who had reached out in desperation, hoping that someone, anyone, would answer. And humanity had come. Against all odds, through endless space and countless dangers, they had arrived. No one knew if the aliens were still alive, but it didn't matter. Humans had made a promise, and they would keep it. The fleet began preparing for descent, scanning the planet for life signs. As the ships moved closer, static filled the communication channels. Then through the interference came a faint trembling sound, the same alien voice weaker than ever repeating the same plea. "Help us. You are the closest." The bridge crew fell silent. Commander Holt took a deep breath and looked at her team. "We're here," she said softly. "Let's bring them hope." In that moment, the story of humanity changed forever. What had begun as a mysterious signal had become a mission that would define the future of two civilizations. The Deathworlders had come not as conquerors or explorers, but as rescuers, answering a call that no one else had dared to hear. And in the endless dark between stars, for the first time, humanity was not alone. The fleet of 12 ships moved silently through the blackness of space, each one carrying hundreds of people and thousands of dreams. They were far from home now, farther than any human had ever gone before. The stars outside their windows looked colder, sharper, like distant fires burning in the void. Inside the ships, life continued in small rhythms: meals, repairs, sleep, and long talks to fight the loneliness. Commander Sarah Holt spent most of her time awake, moving from ship to ship through the quantum link network, making sure everything stayed in control. She was calm, focused, and full of quiet strength. Her crew looked up to her, even when exhaustion showed in her eyes. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. The emptiness of space began to feel like an endless ocean. The fleet passed through regions filled with glowing dust and floating rocks that sparkled like shattered glass. At times, everyone gathered at the viewing decks to watch cosmic storms dance across the sky, lightning flashing between the clouds of color. It was beautiful but dangerous. One wrong move and a ship could be destroyed. Commander Holt made sure her pilots were careful, and her engineers worked around the clock to keep the shields strong. One night, as the fleet entered a dense field of space debris, alarms began to sound. A massive radiation storm was approaching fast, and there was no time to turn back. "Brace for impact!" Holt shouted through the comms. The storm hit like an invisible wave. Lights flickered, engines shook, and several ships lost their connection to the fleet for hours. Sparks flew inside control rooms as circuits overloaded. But the humans didn't panic. They had faced worse storms back on Earth: hurricanes, wildfires, earthquakes. This was just another challenge, another test. Working together, they repaired what was broken, shielded what they could, and waited out the storm. When it finally ended, the fleet was still standing. Humanity had survived again, just like it always did. After the storm, the crews gathered in the recreation halls to rest and share stories. They laughed about their near-death experience, calling it the universe's welcome party. It became a moment of bonding, a reminder of who they were, people from the most dangerous world known to exist, unshaken by anything. Commander Holt listened quietly as her people told stories about Earth. Some spoke about the oceans, others about the forests and the smell of rain. A young engineer named Malik described the time he hiked across a volcano in Iceland. "We are used to danger," he said proudly. "Our home taught us that pain is not the end, it's just a lesson." Everyone cheered, and for the first time in weeks they felt truly alive. As the fleet continued its journey, scientists on board began studying the data about the alien world they were heading to. They had named the planet Allura, after the signal sender Alluri. The readings showed that the planet was once beautiful, covered in silver oceans and glowing blue forests. But something terrible had happened. Radiation spikes, temperature collapse, and signs of massive destruction filled the data. It looked like a world that had once been alive but was now dying slowly. Commander Holt watched the images in silence. She wondered what kind of people the Alluri were, and how they had fallen into such tragedy. On the 97th day of the mission, the fleet entered the final jump zone. Ahead of them lay the Alluri system. Before the jump, Commander Holt made a speech to the entire fleet. Her voice echoed through every hallway and cabin. "We don't know what we'll find when we arrive," she said. "Maybe they're gone. Maybe they're waiting. But we came here for a reason, to help no matter the cost. We are the children of Earth, and Earth never turns away from those who call for help." Her words filled every heart with courage. The crews cheered, and the final jump began. The moment they emerged, the sight before them took everyone's breath away. The alien system glowed under a dim red star that pulsed weakly like a dying heart. The planet Allura spun below, wrapped in thick gray clouds. From orbit, they could see the remains of cities, huge metallic structures half buried in dust and ash. Mountains were cracked open, and the oceans had turned black. The sensors detected high radiation levels, massive storms, and nearly no movement on the surface. It was a graveyard of a world. But then something happened. Deep beneath the clouds, one of the scanners caught a flicker of energy. It was small, faint, but steady like a heartbeat. Commander Holt leaned forward, staring at the data. "That's them," she whispered. "They're still alive." The bridge erupted in cheers and tears. After months of uncertainty, they had found the survivors. The Alluri were not gone, they were waiting, still holding on to life. Holt immediately ordered a descent plan. The fleet moved into orbit, releasing drones and probes to survey the surface. The footage that came back shocked everyone. Entire cities had collapsed into pits of molten rock. Metallic towers stood twisted and broken. Strange alien vehicles lay scattered like bones across the land. The atmosphere was thin, and lightning storms crackled endlessly across the skies. Yet beneath it all, the scanners showed life signs, weak but real. The Alluri were hiding underground, in deep shelters built beneath the ruins. The scientists began analyzing the Alluri technology, trying to understand what went wrong. It seemed their world had once been powered by enormous energy cores buried beneath the crust. These cores provided limitless power, but something caused them to overload. The explosions poisoned the atmosphere and destroyed their environment. It was as if the planet had turned against its own creators. The Alluri had tried to fix it, but their technology couldn't handle the chain reaction. In the end, they had sent that desperate message into space, hoping someone would hear them before it was too late. And humanity had. As the fleet prepared for landing, emotions ran high. Some crew members were afraid of diseases, radiation, or alien hostility. But Commander Holt reminded them of their duty. "We didn't come all this way to watch from the sky," she said. "We came to save lives." Her courage inspired everyone. Teams of medics, engineers, and scientists packed their gear, ready to step onto a new world for the first time in human history. The first ship, Dauntless Horizon, began its descent through the red clouds. The turbulence was rough, shaking everyone to their bones. Lightning flashed across the sky, painting everything in shades of crimson and gold. The crew gripped their seats as the ship broke through the storm layer, and finally touched down on a rocky plain filled with dust and debris. The silence that followed was eerie, almost sacred. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Commander Holt's voice came softly through the radio. "Welcome to Allura." The doors opened with a hiss, and the landing team stepped out, their boots sinking into the fine dust. The air was toxic, so they wore suits and oxygen helmets. The landscape around them was both beautiful and heartbreaking. Ruins of towering buildings, scattered machines, and strange glowing crystals half buried in the ground. The wind carried a low hum, almost like a song. Suddenly, one of the scanners beeped. A faint movement appeared on the radar not far from their position. The team followed it cautiously, weapons ready but hearts hopeful. They climbed over broken metal and twisted beams until they reached a collapsed structure. Inside, through the cracks, they saw something move. A figure, small and fragile, with shimmering skin that reflected the faint light. It was an Alluri. The alien looked terrified, weak, and exhausted. Its large eyes glowed softly, filled with both fear and wonder. It stared at the humans in silence, trembling. Commander Holt slowly removed her helmet, showing her face. She smiled and placed a hand on her chest. "We came to help," she said softly. The Alluri didn't understand the words, but something in her tone made it relax. It reached out a thin hand, shaking. Their fingers almost touched, human and alien, two worlds meeting for the first time in history. More Alluri appeared from the shadows, dozens of them, then hundreds. They were thin, starving, and afraid. But when they saw the humans offering food and light, their expressions changed from fear to hope. Tears rolled down their glowing cheeks as they realized their message had been answered. They were not alone anymore. Back on the ship, the crew watched the live footage in silence. Some cried. Others just stared, unable to believe what they were seeing. Humanity had finally made contact. Not with enemies or conquerors, but with survivors asking for help. Commander Holt looked around at her team and said quietly, "This is why we came." And as the fleet above the planet glowed under the red sun, every human aboard knew that the journey had just begun. The hardest part was still ahead. Saving Allura would test everything they had. But in that moment, standing beneath the broken sky, they also knew something else. The Deathworlders had arrived, and hope had arrived with them. The first contact between humans and the Alluri happened in silence. The air around them was thick with dust and tension. The humans stood in their heavy suits, faces hidden behind helmets, while the Alluri, fragile and trembling, peered at them with wide, glowing eyes. They were thinner than expected, almost transparent, as if made of glass and light. Their bodies shimmered faintly under the dying red sun. Commander Sarah Holt raised her hand slowly and showed her open palm. It was a simple gesture of peace, something universal. The Alluri stared at it for a long moment. Then one of them stepped forward. It touched her gloved hand gently, its fingers cold and trembling. The connection was made, not through words, but through understanding. Both species had seen death and both wanted to live. The communication barrier was the next challenge. The Alluri spoke in a melodic language, full of tones and rhythms that no human ear could fully grasp. The scientist worked for hours inside the landing module, running the alien speech through translators, comparing sound patterns to the message that had been received months earlier. Slowly, they began to find meanings. When Commander Holt said, "We came to help," the machine translated it into something close to "light comes to shadow." The Alluri seemed to understand that. They smiled weakly, their eyes bright with tears that sparkled like crystals. Over the next few days, the humans built a temporary camp near one of the surviving underground shelters. The air was too toxic to breathe for long, so both species met in enclosed domes filled with filtered oxygen. The Alluri were cautious but curious. They watched the humans work, building structures, setting up energy shields, unpacking food and supplies. They were amazed by the humans' endurance. Even under the harsh red storms, the Deathworlders moved with purpose, repairing, lifting, creating. The first true conversation happened between Commander Holt and an elder Alluri named Esharan. Her skin glowed a pale silver, and her eyes carried the wisdom of centuries. With the help of translators, Esharan explained the tragedy that had destroyed their world. Long ago, the Alluri had created vast energy cores beneath the planet's surface. These cores gave them endless power and peace. They had built shining cities and filled the skies with ships of light. But one day, something went wrong. The cores started to collapse one after another, poisoning the air and tearing apart the land. The Allori tried to stop it, but it spread too fast. Many died in the explosions. Those who survived hid underground, waiting for the air to clear, but it never did. The more the humans learned, the more their hearts ached. The Allori had once been a proud and intelligent race, but now they were barely holding on. Food was running out. Radiation sickness spread among their children, and their shelters were crumbling. When Commander Holt asked how long they had been like this, Escharin replied softly, "Too many cycles. Too much sorrow." The humans decided to act immediately. They set up medical tents and began treating the sick. Dr. Leon, the chief medical officer, worked day and night with her team, creating antidotes and using nanobots to clean radiation from Allori blood. The aliens were fascinated by human medicine. They had long lost the knowledge of healing, as their scientists had all perished in the first explosions. Now they watched in awe as humans fought death itself with determination. Some Allori children were too weak to stand, but when the humans fed them nutrient packs, color began to return to their glowing faces. The first time an Allori child smiled again, everyone in the camp clapped and cried. While the doctors worked, the engineers focused on the environment. They deployed portable terraforming machines, devices that released oxygen, absorbed toxins, and cooled radiation zones. The process was slow, but progress was visible. The red dust began to settle, and patches of blue sky appeared for the first time in years. The Allori emerged from their shelters to see the open world again, their eyes filled with disbelief. Some fell to their knees, crying softly, whispering prayers of gratitude. The humans didn't understand the words, but they understood the feeling. Every night, Commander Holt met with her officers to plan the next steps. The mission was no longer just about rescue. It had become about rebirth. The humans were not only saving lives, they were restoring an entire civilization. But it wasn't easy. Supplies were limited, and the atmosphere was still dangerous. There were moments when hope felt fragile, like the thin domes that protected them. Yet every time something broke, the Deathworlders fixed it. When a terraforming unit malfunctioned, 2 engineers volunteered to go outside in a storm to repair it. When radiation levels rose near the main camp, the medics worked without rest to keep everyone safe. The Allori watched all this in wonder. To them, humans were not just visitors, they were miracles made of flesh and fire. One evening, as the twin moons rose above the dusty horizon, the Allori held a small ceremony to thank their rescuers. They lit floating orbs that shimmered in the air like tiny stars and sang a haunting song in their language. The melody was sad yet beautiful, full of hope and sorrow mixed together. Commander Holt and her team stood quietly listening. When the song ended, Escharin turned to her and said, "Your world must be strong to create people like you." Holt smiled faintly and replied, "Our world is cruel, but it teaches us to fight for life." The translation device hummed softly as it converted her words, and when the Allori heard them, they bowed their heads respectfully. As days passed, communication improved. The scientists developed a common translation program, allowing humans and Allori to talk more freely. The 2 species began to exchange knowledge. The Allori showed humans their old machines, strange, elegant structures powered by light crystals. The humans, in turn, taught them how to build with metal and energy fusion. Together, they began rebuilding the first clean energy generator in centuries. It was a symbol of cooperation, of 2 worlds becoming one. There were also small heartwarming moments that made everyone feel closer. A human technician taught an Allori child how to draw using digital tablets. In return, the child showed her how to make glowing shapes with bioluminescent dust. Soldiers played music from Earth, and the Allori listened with wonder, swaying gently to the rhythm. At night, both sides would gather near the transparent domes, looking at the stars together. Some Allori even began learning human words. The first one they learned was hope. But even with progress, challenges remained. The planet was still unstable. The ground trembled from time to time, and dark clouds often returned without warning. The radiation pockets under the surface made certain areas deadly to approach. Commander Holt knew the rescue mission could fail if they didn't find a way to stabilize the planet permanently. She ordered her engineers to study the old Allori energy cores, hoping to understand what caused the disaster. It was dangerous work, but they were determined. During one of these expeditions, a small human team discovered a chamber deep beneath the ground. Inside were the remains of the main energy core, a massive glowing sphere cracked in half, leaking faint blue mist. The reading showed that if the remaining cores weren't shut down soon, they could explode again. Commander Holt realized they were racing against time. She gathered her team and said, "We didn't come this far to lose them now." The humans prepared to enter the deadly zones to repair the systems, even though they knew it might cost lives. Back in the main camp, the Allori tried to stop them. "You cannot go," Asharan pleaded. "Those places kill even our strongest." But Holt shook her head. "We're Deathworlders," she said simply. "Our home teaches us to survive where others can't." The translation echoed through the hall, and the Allori fell silent. They saw in her eyes the same fire that had kept humanity alive through every storm in history. As the humans prepared for the mission, the Allori children gathered around them, handing them small glowing crystals as gifts of luck. The humans smiled and accepted them, touched by the gesture. It was no longer just a rescue operation. It was a bond of trust and friendship. Before dawn, Commander Holt stood on the ridge, watching the first rays of light break through the red clouds. The air was still harsh, but it carried a hint of warmth. Behind her, the humans worked tirelessly, and the Allori watched with gratitude. For the first time in a long while, both species believed that survival was possible. That night, as the stars shimmered above the dying world, Asharan looked up and whispered to herself, "Maybe the universe sent them to us, not as strangers but as saviors." And far above, in the orbiting fleet, a message was sent back to Earth. Contact made. Survivors found. Hope lives. The work to save the Allori world had truly begun, but no one on the fleet was prepared for how hard it would be. The planet looked peaceful from the sky, but underneath its surface lay danger in every direction. The ground cracked and shook without warning. The air filled with radiation that could kill within hours, and the energy cores deep underground pulsed like angry hearts ready to explode. Still, the humans refused to give up. Commander Sarah Holt knew that the mission was no longer just about survival. It was about proving that compassion was stronger than fear. The first few weeks were spent trying to stabilize the damaged atmosphere. The engineers deployed hundreds of drones to release purifying chemicals and absorb radiation. Slowly, the red fog began to thin, revealing glimpses of a clearer sky. The Allori, who had not seen sunlight in years, stepped out of their underground shelters for the first time. Many fell to their knees, crying softly as they looked up at the pale blue light filtering through the haze. For them, it was a miracle. For the humans, it was motivation. They had brought life back to a dying world, even if only for a few moments. But soon after that, disaster struck. The terraforming machines began to malfunction. Something underground was interfering with their systems, causing massive energy surges. One morning, a huge explosion shook the camp. Dust filled the air, and several humans were injured. Commander Holt ran to the scene and saw one of the oxygen towers in flames. The Allori gathered around, terrified. She didn't panic. Instead, she shouted for her crew to form a line and start repairs immediately. Within an hour, the fire was out and the damage was contained. Her calm leadership gave everyone strength. But deep inside, she knew that the planet itself was unstable. It was fighting them. The scientists soon discovered the reason. The energy cores beneath the surface were still active. They had been partially destroyed years ago, but their unstable energy kept releasing radiation. The planet's crust was thin and weak, and if the cores fully collapsed, the entire world could explode. To stop it, they would have to go underground and manually stabilize the remaining cores. It was an impossible task. No living being had entered those tunnels in decades. The Allori said it was suicide. Commander Holt simply nodded and said, "Then it's a good thing we're used to impossible." A team of engineers, soldiers, and scientists volunteered for the mission. They wore advanced radiation suits and carried portable shields. The Allori elders begged them not to go, but Holt insisted. "If we don't fix it now," she said, "your world will die for sure." The Allori looked at her in silence, realizing how much these humans were risking for a planet that wasn't even their own. The descent into the underground tunnels was like entering the heart of a dying beast. The air shimmered with heat and radiation. Strange blue light pulsed from the cracks in the walls. Every step echoed through the hollow metal chambers of the ancient energy cores. The team worked carefully, sealing leaks, repairing systems, and rerouting energy flows. Commander Holt led from the front, refusing to stay behind. Even when her suit's temperature warnings flashed red, she kept moving. The others followed her example, driven by her courage. After hours of work, one of the engineers, Malik, discovered a huge fracture in the central reactor. If it widened any further, it would cause a chain reaction that could destroy everything. They had to weld it shut, but the radiation there was too strong for more than a few minutes of exposure. Holt didn't hesitate. She took the welding torch herself. "I'll do it," she said. Her second-in-command protested, but she only smiled. If this is what it takes, then so be it. She stepped into the reactor chamber, her body trembling from the heat. The air crackled with electricity, and the light was so bright it was almost blinding. Each second felt like an eternity. Her voice came over the radio, calm but strained. "Keep the readings steady. If it spikes, pull me out." Sparks flew as she welded the crack, her hands steady even as her suit alarms screamed warnings. When the final seal was complete, the readings stabilized. The core was secure. The team cheered, their relief echoing through the comms. But when they pulled her out, Holt collapsed. Her radiation levels were dangerously high. She had risked her life, but the mission was a success. The team returned to the surface, carrying Holt on a stretcher. The Elorii gathered around them, silent and stunned. They had never seen such sacrifice. Escharin, the elder, placed her glowing hands over Holt's body and whispered ancient words of gratitude. "You are light in our darkness," she said softly. Holt opened her eyes weakly and smiled. "We're not light," she whispered. "We just don't give up." While Holt recovered, her crew continued the work she had started. The humans and Elorii began repairing the other cores together. The Elorii engineers, inspired by the humans' bravery, returned to their old laboratories and reopened the knowledge they had sealed away in fear. Together they found ways to convert the deadly energy into something stable and clean. Slowly the planet began to heal. The air grew clearer, the radiation levels dropped, and small plants started growing in the protected domes. However, peace did not last long. The strain of survival brought tension between the two species. Some of the Elorii leaders believed that the humans were changing their world too much. They feared losing their identity. One of the council members, a proud and bitter elder named Thalan, argued that the humans should leave once the cores were fixed. "They have done enough," he said. "This is our world, not theirs." His words caused fear and anger to spread among the Elorii. Commander Holt, still weak but recovering, called for a meeting. In the large dome where both sides gathered, she stood in front of everyone. Her face was pale, her movements slow, but her eyes were filled with strength. "You're right," she said. "It is your world. We didn't come to take it from you. We came because no one else would. We came because life, any life, is worth saving." She paused, looking at the Elorii crowd. "Back on Earth, we live through storms, fire, and death. Every day our world tries to kill us, but we learned something important. We survive not because we're the strongest, but because we help each other. That's what life means. Not domination, not control, just hope." The translation device carried her words through the hall. There was silence for a long moment. Then Escharin stepped forward and bowed her head. "We called for help," she said, her voice trembling. "You answered. That is what matters." The tension slowly faded and unity returned. The humans and Elorii began working together again, stronger than before. The next few months brought incredible progress. The repaired cores started producing clean energy, enough to power the entire planet again. The skies began to change color, from red and gray to soft shades of blue and white. For the first time in centuries, Elorii children played outside without masks. The humans built schools and hospitals, and the Elorii shared their ancient technology, which helped advance human science in ways never imagined. It was a true exchange of worlds. Commander Holt spent her days walking through the rebuilt cities, watching the progress with quiet pride. She saw humans and Elorii working side by side, laughing, building, living. One evening she visited the same spot where she had first met Escharin. The elder stood beside her, gazing at the glowing horizon. "You have done what even our gods could not," Escharin said. "You brought life back to a dead world." Holt smiled gently. "No," she replied. "You already had life. You just needed to remember how to fight for it." But even as peace returned, danger still lingered. Deep in the planet's southern hemisphere, one last energy core remained unstable. The readings showed it could collapse at any moment. Holt wanted to lead the mission again, but her crew refused to let her risk her life twice. Instead, a new team of humans and Elorii engineers went together, proving how much trust had grown between them. When they finally stabilized the last core, the ground stopped shaking. The entire planet sighed as if relieved. When they returned, the Allori gathered to celebrate. They lit millions of glowing orbs that floated into the sky like stars. Commander Holt stood among them, her face illuminated by the soft light. Around her, both species sang, the humans humming softly while the Allori added their melodic voices. It was a song of survival, of hope, of unity. That night, Holt wrote a message to Earth. "The Allori live," she said. "Their world breathes again. We came as strangers but stayed as family. Humanity's greatest strength is not our technology or our power. It's our heart." And as the fleet above watched from orbit, they knew that the mission had become something far greater than they had imagined. The Deathworlders had not only saved a planet, they had taught an entire civilization what it truly meant to live. The sun of Allori rose brighter than ever before. Its golden light touched the glass domes, green fields, and silver towers that now stood across the surface of the once dead world. The sky, once filled with red dust and radiation, was now clear and blue, carrying the soft hum of life and wind. Children of both humans and Allori played in the open fields, their laughter echoing across the valleys. For the first time in generations, there was peace. The humans had done what seemed impossible. They had brought a dying planet back to life. But as with all great stories, peace was only the beginning of a new challenge. Commander Sarah Holt stood on the command balcony of the rebuilt capital city. Her uniform looked worn, her eyes a little older, but there was a calm pride in her face. She had spent months helping rebuild Allori's civilization. What had started as a rescue mission had now become an alliance of two species. The Allori called the humans the Deathworlders of Light, a title that once would have been an insult but was now a symbol of respect. Holt smiled at the thought. "Deathworlders," she said softly to herself. "That's what they called us because our world is harsh. But maybe that harshness is what made us strong enough to survive here." Beside her stood Esharen, the wise elder who had first sent the desperate call for help. Her silver eyes shimmered in the sunlight. "Your people have given us a second chance," she said quietly. "We will never forget." Holt turned to her with a gentle smile. "We didn't save you," she said. "We just reminded you how strong you already were." Esharen nodded, but there was worry in her face. "You have done more than that. You have made our enemies take notice." Those words carried a weight that made Holt's smile fade. Over the past few weeks, the fleet had detected strange movements in space. Unknown ships approaching the outer edge of the Allori system. They weren't Allori and they weren't human. They were something else. The Allori called them the Vorn, a species that had once ruled the outer sectors with fear and destruction. The Allori had fled from them long ago, hiding deep within their dying planet. Now that the planet was reborn and its energy cores stable again, it shone like a beacon in the galaxy, and that beacon had drawn unwanted attention. Within days, the first Vorn scouts appeared. Their ships were black and sharp like blades, gliding through space with silent menace. The fleet's sensors picked up their signals, encrypted, fast, and dangerous. Commander Holt called an emergency meeting with her officers and the Allori Council. The room was filled with tension. "They're testing our defenses," Holt said, pointing to the holographic map. "They want to know how far they can push us before we fight back." The Allori Council panicked. Many of them wanted to evacuate again, to hide as they had done for centuries. "We cannot fight the Vorn," one elder shouted. "They destroyed whole systems before. We have just begun to live again. We cannot lose it all." Esharen raised her hand to calm them. "We cannot run forever," she said softly. Then she turned to Holt. "What do you say, Commander? Should we flee or fight?" Holt stood in silence for a moment. Her eyes scanned the map of the planet she had helped save. Every dome, every colony, every sign of life was a result of their combined effort. To abandon it now would mean all their sacrifices were for nothing. "We fight," she said firmly. "But we fight smart. We don't have to destroy them. We just have to protect what we built." The humans began to prepare. The fleet above the planet formed a defensive line. Their ships were not large compared to the Vorn's warships, but they had the advantage of strategy and unity. The Allori contributed their technology, combining their energy systems with human weapons. The result was something new: hybrid warships powered by both human grit and Allori brilliance. For the first time in history, the two species were not just allies, they were one. When the Vorn finally attacked, the sky burned with light. From the surface, people watched as streaks of fire crossed the heavens. The battle was unlike anything the Allori had ever seen. Human pilots moved like lightning, their ships darting between enemy lines while Allori energy shields protected them from deadly blasts. Commander Holt coordinated everything from the command center, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Keep formation," she ordered. "Protect the lower orbit. Don't let them through." For hours, the fight raged. Explosions lit the sky and shockwaves rolled across the planet. The Vorn fleet was vast, but the humans fought with desperation. Born from a world that never gave them mercy, one of the pilots, Lieutenant Raiden, flew straight into the heart of an enemy formation, sacrificing his ship to take down 3 Vorn cruisers. His last words echoed through the comms. "Tell them Earth says hello." The fleet cheered through tears. Even in death, the humans refused to bow, but then a massive Vorn battleship appeared. It was larger than anything they had seen, its hull covered in black armor, its weapons glowing with energy. The fleet's fire barely scratched it. The Allori energy readings spiked dangerously high. "It's charging a planet strike," one scientist shouted. Holt's heart froze. A single hit could destroy everything they had rebuilt. She turned to her second in command. "We have one chance," she said. "We take it down from inside." She gathered a small team of soldiers and engineers and boarded a stealth shuttle. They flew through the battlefield, dodging enemy fire, and landed directly on the Vorn battleship. Inside, the corridors were dark and cold, filled with mechanical sounds and alien light. The team fought their way through guards using both human weapons and Allori energy blades. When they reached the reactor core, they saw the weapon's energy building to an unbearable level. Holt ordered her team to plant explosives, but something went wrong. The Vorn commander, a towering creature covered in metallic armor, appeared. Its voice was deep and filled with arrogance. "You think you can stop us, Deathworlder?" it said. Holt stood her ground. "We don't think." "We do." She charged forward, firing her weapon while her team activated the explosives. The battle was fierce and desperate. Holt was thrown against a wall, her armor breaking, but she kept fighting. Finally, with one last shot, she hit the reactor's control node. The energy surged wildly. She shouted into the comms, "Detonate now!" The explosion shook the heavens. The massive Vorn battleship shattered into fragments of burning light. The blast blinded the skies, and for a moment everything went silent. Then the radio crackled to life. "The flagship is down," came a voice from orbit. "The enemy fleet is retreating." Cheers erupted across the fleet and the planet below. The people of Allori looked up at the sky, tears streaming down their faces. They had survived again, not because of strength alone, but because of unity. Commander Holt's shuttle was found hours later, half destroyed but still intact. She was alive, though badly injured. When she woke in the medical chamber, Eshiren was beside her, holding her hand. "You saved us again," the elder said softly. Holt gave a faint smile. "No," she whispered. "We saved each other." In the days that followed, the humans and Allori worked together to rebuild once more. The fleet stayed in orbit, not as conquerors or rescuers, but as guardians. A new treaty was signed between Earth and Allori, a promise of friendship and protection. Trade ships began to travel between their worlds, carrying knowledge, culture, and hope. Years later, children of both species would read about the day the Deathworlders came, not as destroyers, but as saviors. Statues of the brave humans and Allori who fought side by side were built across the cities, and at the center of the capital stood a tall monument with the names of those who gave their lives. At the top was Commander Holt's name, followed by the words, "We came from a world of death to bring life." Every year, on the anniversary of that day, the skies above Allori filled with lights. Humans and Allori would release glowing orbs that drifted upward, merging into the stars. And when people looked at the heavens, they saw not darkness or war, but unity, courage, and the endless power of life. As the years passed, the story of the Deathworlders became legend. Some said that humanity's gift was not technology or strength, but their spirit, the ability to fight for others even when hope seemed lost. The Allori believed that the universe had sent them the Deathworlders not by chance but by fate, and perhaps they were right. For in a galaxy filled with endless dangers and cold stars, there were now 2 worlds that stood together, proving that compassion was the strongest force of all. And so, in the quiet peace that followed, Commander Holt stood once again on the balcony, watching the new dawn rise over the healed world. The wind carried laughter and the hum of life. She closed her eyes and whispered, "We did it." The sun rose higher, and in its light, the world of Allori shone, alive, free, and forever grateful to the Deathworlders who had brought the fleet when the universe itself had turned its back.